Welcome to Deconstructing Digital, the podcast where we deconstruct the opportunities and challenges faced when digitalising processes for the built environment. I'm your host, Amelia Fletcher-Blackburn, and today we have an incredible guest joining us, someone who's shaping the future of digital innovation in construction. Vicki, could you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Vicki Reynolds, and I am the Technical Director of Digital Estates at One Creative Environments. I'm also the Academic Director for a Master's in BIM Management at Ziggurat University and part of the executive team at Women in BIM. I've been in the construction industry for quite a while now. I don't want to give away my age, so I won't be too specific. But I've worked on the side of a contractor. I've worked on client side, project management, in information management, BIM, digital delivery, and digital upskilling. So I really enjoy now looking at the whole landscape with all of those different hats on and seeing how we can improve continuously to make the environment safer and greener.
That is excellent. And what an introduction. So in this episode, we're going to be exploring digital twins and the golden thread. So how golden rules are being delivered via digital tools. So clearly you have a wealth of knowledge and have been at the forefront of driving digital change in the built environment for over a decade. So we talked about the fact we're going to mention digital twins and golden thread. So those two concepts, are you able to just break that down a little bit for our listeners as to what they exactly are?
Yep, absolutely. So the golden thread is something that's being talked about quite a lot now and has been for the last few years in response to the Hackett report and the Building Safety Act, obviously post Grenfell and the disaster there where 72 people lost their lives. And the golden thread was a phrase that was used in Dame Judith Hackett's report to explain the need for a thread of information going from the earliest possible stages of planning and strategy all the way through to operation and decommission of a building that zones in on safety and fire safety and ensuring that a building is constructed safely, it's designed safely with safety in mind, and that it's operated in a way that continuously keeps residents, occupants, visitors to that asset safe from fire and other kinds of disasters. So it's not a product that you can buy. It's not a quick fix. It's a whole change of strategy and mindset. It's putting information management first and foremost, and it is an ongoing process in which fire safety information is placed at the very forefront of everything that we do in the industry.
That's so interesting. As you say, it's not about a particular product or process. It's more a concept and way of thinking that you constantly need to be revisiting throughout the life cycle of an asset. So that's golden thread, which is excellent. How about digital twin?
This is another one that has come to the forefront over the past few years and has been used correctly, but also incorrectly in a lot of discussions. So a digital twin is a two-way feed of information between a physical and a virtual asset. And the important part there is that it's two-way. So what is happening in the physical asset, which can be captured by sensors, IoT and CCTV footage, all kinds of different ways of collecting data, pushes that into a virtual environment where that can then be analyzed, simulations can be carried out, and decisions can be made in that virtual environment that then feed back and affect the physical. And what that is often mistaken for is what we might call a digital shadow, which is a virtual version of a physical asset with the one-way stream of information. So you're collecting all the data from the physical, it's pushing into the virtual, and you use that to analyze and simulate, but it has no effect on the physical environment. At the end of the day, I'm a big believer in the fact that ultimately the words don't matter. You find the solution that's right for you to solve the problems. And if you go out with the with the idea that you want to procure a digital twin or that you're going to create a digital twin, rather than here's a problem that I want to solve and this is how I might solve it. That's where you might come across stumbling blocks. That's where you struggle sometimes to win the hearts and minds, because you don't have that really solid why behind what you're doing.
It's a really interesting point, isn't it? It's like you don't buy technology just for the sake of it. You've got to understand the specific problem or use case that you're trying to resolve. So what's a good example of a use case that would mean that a business should think about having the concept of a digital twin?
Ultimately, find your problem or identify your problem. And for every asset, for every organization, for every individual, that might be something different. But it has to be something that has enough of an effect that a new technology or a new process will cause significant benefit or result in significant benefit. And so a great example, if we take fire safety, because we've been talking about that with digital twins, a great example of, with the golden thread, a great example of using a digital twin to promote and to evidence fire safety would be taking data from CCTV and sensors to determine at any one time where the people are in your building, so that if there's an incident, a fire incident, you can quickly determine where the people are and where the emergency services should place their efforts when they first arrive. It's also an option then to be able to identify any fire exits that are blocked. You can quickly see, here's our fire exit or our the one stairway that we have in the building, and we can see that for whatever reason it's not working, or a lift isn't working, which is what would usually be used for the first responders. And so there are just so many options available, but you have to identify your biggest point of risk or your biggest concern, your problem, to then fix that with the right solution, rather than let's just bring in a digital twin.
What I love about that example you used as well is that's really talking about digital twin rather than that digital shadow, because that's about real-time information that can be used in a really serious issue to help ensure that people themselves are safe and evacuated. Have you found that people have struggled with getting that two-way feed of data and therefore it being real time?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the whole point of new processes, bringing in new technology, especially when it involves things like tech platforms, new software, SaaS, and sensors, it means a lot of initial spend for a long time, a long-term gain in efficiencies of running the building, but also in things like your safety case and being able to put forward evidence that your building is safe. So we've often struggled in construction with taking the hit of one big cost for that longer term benefit, because the way budgets are managed, it really is about the here and now. Whichever contractors involved at that time, they don't want to be the ones to bring in this big cost. Everybody has budgetary targets, and also we're veering into the unknown. So you may have a good concept or a good case, but we're still quite wary of technology. And unless you can see case studies that have done exactly what you want to do in the past and they've been successful, it really is hard to win hearts and minds and get people to make that leap initially.
Definitely. And that's been a really interesting theme that's come out through a number of the different podcast episodes, is how do you make sure the digital transformation is successful? And a lot of that is around having the right business case up at the beginning, understanding your use cases, and then the hearts and minds of individuals throughout. When building those investment cases, have you found examples where you actually believe there'll be greater efficiencies from a digital twin, which can then help to fuel and further invest within that business case?
Yep, absolutely. However, I would be mindful of selling too big. So the more outcomes that you're saying you can have, that you're proposing, that you're expecting, the more complex your solution needs to be. So in some instances, it's much better to say, we're doing this small thing, we're starting small and solving this one problem. And then when that's successful, we will build and build and build. Whereas if you make too many sort of sales pitches about becoming more efficient and better, greener, saving money, that all means more data, more collection, more sensors and more processes, which is then a much bigger project, a much bigger task with much more likely to potentially fail and overwhelm.
Understood. So make sure that you're keeping it quite neat and tight as to what their first use case is, because you mentioned a great point there as well, is the quality of data is really important, but therefore you need the processes around it to make sure that people understand the data is being inputted correctly and is being managed. There's a whole wraparound layer around the technology, which needs to all
absolutely
together.
Yeah. Data is expensive as well. You know, the more you collect, the more you've got to store. And we all have heard stories about how terrible it can be for the environment. Data centers, even cloud storage has a significant carbon footprint. So if you're looking at increasing sustainability and the efficiencies of your building, you have to make sure that is it doesn't overshadow the fact that you may be using more data centers, you may be collecting more data, and you're actually being far less efficient there.
Such an interesting point as well around not just the economic cost, but the environmental cost of some of these solutions, especially when you've got high volumes of data processing, which is kind of an invisible environmental cost to a lot of people. It's not the same as fumes outside of a car, for example. It's one of those that's kind of hidden in the background. We talked quite a bit around digital twin there, which is excellent. What do you think is the biggest misconception that organizations have around implementing the golden thread?
I think the biggest misconception is that it's a solution you can purchase or that you can put in place once. Or that it's a checkbox. So there's a really interesting presentation by Dame Judith Hackett at a CIOB event the other month, where she read out some of the responses that they'd had to the Gateway 2 submissions so far. So essentially the case that building owners are putting forward to prove that the building that they're due to construct is fire safe. And there are a couple of instances where people were so, I don't know if it was flustered or frustrated by the extra admin and paperwork and justification that they had to do, where they had literally written things like, I comply with the regulations, surely that's enough. And so the whole mindset of the golden thread is a real shift, because rather than saying, tell me, we're saying, show me, which is very different. Previously, we've asked people to convince us that they are safe by telling us that they're safe. Whereas now the regulator is saying, don't just tell me that you're safe, show me that you're safe. And that is not in the form of a template or a checkbox that's being provided. The onus is on the person submitting the case to show the evidence that is most relevant to the asset that they're building and that they're constructing or operating, which is a huge change to mindset for us. So I would say that is the biggest stumbling block and misconception around what the golden thread really is.
It is amazing, isn't it? That whole point that just saying you're doing it isn't enough. How do you show it? How do you evidence it? So that comes on to my next question on how do you think that digital twins and the golden thread complement each other in actually driving better information management, safer practices, and that auditability?
The golden thread, I think, will be a catalyst for the use of more solutions like digital twins. It will also, I think, lead to an influx in the implementation of things like AI solutions to form part of that evidence base. So when you have something like that set up, like a digital twin, the evidence is very clear because you can say, look, here's my real-time simulation. This is how I'm actively monitoring my building, making real-time changes. It's very, very easy to put that case across. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the only way to put the case across. You can absolutely comply to all of the regulations and the golden thread with PDFs, and a very simple file management system. So it really is about identifying which is the right solution for you. And it then comes back down to, a costly change now for longer term ease, or carry on being a little bit clunky, a little bit more manual, but that is the better solution. Maybe because you don't have a lot of cash at the moment, or because the business case isn't strong enough. You're a smaller company, you're still finding your feet. Everything is a personalized solution. So it is up to each individual building owner to sit back and say, right, based on all of these circumstances, what we have available, the people that we have working with us, the solutions that we already have, how do we then take that one step further? So, I think digital twins are absolutely one way to evidence the golden thread, not the only way. And I think as we develop technology, there'll be more and more solutions that form that architecture of building safety.
Brilliant. So please correct me if this isn't the right way of summarizing it. So if I think about the golden thread, that's all around a concept, legislation, evidencing, ensuring that what we said we're going to build is what we've built, and this is how we're maintaining the safety standards wrapped around it. And a digital twin is one potential way to meet those requirements.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Good to know, because hopefully I think that's a really interesting point that I didn't fully appreciate prior to this. And I think it's a really good way of actually thinking about it, around how the golden thread itself isn't a piece of technology or a product. It's a set of requirements that we need to adhere to. So I think that is really interesting. So we've really honed in a lot on how digital tools such as your digital twin can meet your golden rules or the golden thread, which is interesting. When you actually look at the construction sector itself, what do you think is going to be the biggest impact innovation wise in the next 5 years?
I think both negatively and positively, the greatest impact will come from AI. It's coming at us. It's a force to be reckoned with. And I think I have seen some really great examples of how people are innovating with it. I've also seen some quite worrying examples of the way people have brought it into processes. And it's really going to be a case of us finding our feet. Those trailblazers, they're very aware that they're taking risk. The payout could be brilliant or it could not be. And when you come to subjects like fire safety, I think at the moment there's less appetite for risk because there's more at stake. But AI is such a broad tech or solution that it will come into play even with things like the way we submit tender information, the way we write business cases, case studies, all the way through to the simulations that we use and the way that we analyze the data that we have. It's going to affect all of the big stuff, but then also quite a lot of the little stuff. I'd be very surprised if in 5 years there were people still in construction that didn't have some part of their day-to-day role affected by the use of AI.
It's so interesting as well, because you talked earlier around the environmental cost of things such as data. But AI also has its own environmental cost. And we're talking quite a bit around, obviously, safety and the importance of the golden thread and digital twin from a safety angle. Is there a sustainability angle that people should also be aware of when it comes to those two, the concept of golden thread, but then also the delivery of that through things such as a digital twin?
Yeah, it's always going to be a balance. So you may find if you've got an internal sustainability team as well, they might have very strong opinions about the use of data centers, the use of cloud storage, how big those assets can get. in relation to the return in terms of greater sustainability during construction or operation. And at the moment, we really don't know what that will look like long term. I mean, we've had the situation with Chinese AI, the DeepSeek, which has significantly reduced the resource that we thought we needed for AI outputs. And so I think that will be a trend that we see more and more over the decades, I guess, where there are newer innovations, things get more efficient and better organized as we learn. So it's very, very difficult to gauge where the line is from the point of, right, here's an output, by the way, that data is affecting us and the storage there. Here's an output in terms of the efficiencies we're getting back. Here's the comparison. Here's the calculation. Therefore, X is the best route. That's going to be a continually evolving and changing playing field. But that's the excitement. You know, if there wasn't some uncertainty, that means that there wouldn't be any change. And change, as we all know in this industry, needs to come. We are, you know, we're so far down the pecking order when it comes to innovation and the use of technology that change has to happen.
I love that as well when you're talking about when you're assessing what the right thing is to do from your business case perspective. It's not just now about a monetary cost, it's that environmental cost as well, and weighing it all up as to how best to proceed. It's been incredible listening to your experiences and your thoughts. If there was one thing that you know now that you didn't know when you started your career, what would that one thing be?
Everything. It would be the cultural change piece. When I started my career, I thought that change was all about implementing new technology and bringing in new tools. And I completely underestimated how much you have to bring people along for the journey and what that really means. Every individual will have their own reasons for either embracing or not embracing change. And to a certain point, you have to consider most of those and understand them. If change isn't happening within your organization and you're creating all the right processes and you're buying all the right tech and you've got a great digital team, then you're missing out the culture piece. And the culture piece extends wider than organizations. You know, it's industry wide for us. We don't necessarily want to embrace change sometimes for many reasons. And some of those reasons are very, very good reasons. And so to influence change, you really have to understand that.
I love that point. And we talk about the topic of our episode today was golden rules delivered via digital tools. But actually, it's that digital proposition, which includes people, process, technology, with people being at the heart of it. Well, Vicki, it's been amazing having you on the episode today. So thank you so much. And we did it. We deconstructed digital.